from the Institute for the Advancement of Cognitive Education. These are powerful podcasts, conversations with scholars, authors, and professionals, cutting-edge resources, helping you to enhance better thinking and learning.
Good day, welcome at today's podcast on text structures. We are hosting today Estelle Brettenny. This is the second time we are having her as a podcast interviewee. Estelle Brettenny is a passionate occupational therapist for more than 40 years. She specializes in metacognitive therapeutic intervention and learning health for Generation Z learners since 1998. She's a certified trainer in cognitive enrichment advantage and thinking maps. For more than 20 years, she specializes in cognitive education training of educators and professionals. She was part of the board of the International Association for Cognitive Education in Southern Africa for 2 decades, and in that regard, she also served as president of this association from 2013 to 2015. She's a founding member of Thinking School South Africa and currently an honorary member of the Institute for the Advancement of Cognitive Education. Estelle Brettenny have also integrated her knowledge and experience into a user-friendly approach called the Be More approach, which is suited for learners, parents, educators, and professionals. Estelle, you are so welcome.
Thank you very much.
So today we're going to talk about text structures. What is text structure in books and notes, and how can it enhance or hamper learning?
Okay, text structure refers to the way that information is organized in a text. Like builders use different structures to build a building, for example, bricks or steel, authors use different text structures to build text. Bonnemeyer was the first to actually describe types of expository or informational text structures. And according to various resources and sources, the most common text structures are description, compare and contrast, sequence, cause and effect, and problem and solution. Each text structure has typical signal words or clue words that signal the text structure to the reader. For example, if we think about cause and effect, that is a text structure. Signal words can include caused by, if, then, outcome, thus, therefore, etc. Signal words are also referred to as transitions, and they act as road signs to help the readers to navigate the text. The transitions signal to the reader how the next idea or detail is related to the previous one.
So Estelle, I like the metaphors that you use of construction, of constructing a building and also of road signs. So what you say is that any academic text is then actually constructed or should be constructed in a solid way like one would construct a building.
That's dead right. And maybe I can just mention at the moment the visual resource that will be part of my blog and that I would refer to. I've used a very simple analogy later on of the 3 little pigs that's building their little houses with straw, sticks and bricks. Now, exactly like children understand a story when 3 little pigs build their houses, real construction is also built with different structures. So all these structures make up the text, like you use these structures to build a house. And the signals in the text is not always very clear for children or for adults. And that's why we need to teach people about the structures and also about the signal words. Now, the signal words can be, for example, very, very tiny, small little words or very specific words like outcome or therefore, but sometimes those words are not recognized enough or people don't pay attention enough to those little signal words and then they actually miss the text structure. So it's like you need the cement to put the bricks together. Often the little signal words that keeps the text together are missed by readers, and then they actually don't understand what they are reading.
And what I like about this metaphor of construction, of course, if one understands the construction of knowledge in the text better, the construction and the understanding in the mind of the learner is also more effective.
That's right. No, that's exactly what the author's got some intent with writing the piece or the informational text. And the reader must identify or figure out what is the author trying to say. And the way we can do it, besides all the other factors that plays a role in terms of vocabulary, etc., but the way that author is intending to put the message across is by using certain text structures to indicate, is this a description or is this a piece about cause and effect, or is this the sequence? And all those text structures makes up the text.
Estelle, thank you so much. Can you explain to us where does the concept of text structure instruction come from?
Yes, I did quite a lot of reading to also get more information myself. And according to the literature that I've looked at, text structure instruction has been researched and refined over a period of more than 4 decades. Meyer and her colleagues, and specifically Bonnie Meyer, was the person that initiated a lot of this research, according to the way I picked it up. But many people after that also did research, and I picked up one meta-analysis of text structure instruction, concluded that text structure instruction is an effective way to enhance informational reading comprehension. And obviously that's critical for academic success. So Meyer and some of her co-researchers state that there is substantial and consistent evidence that text structure instruction increases recall from informational text, and that the quality of the recall is better, that learners have increased understanding and use of signaling words, and that learners can eventually identify main ideas much better and produce better summaries. Text structure instruction can also change the type of ideas that learners underline as important, and I think I see that on a daily basis when I work with children. They often isolated keywords, but they leave the signaling words, and eventually they're not capable of adding the extra information to make full sentences again, because they've learned or memorized keywords out of context of the specific text structure. So for me, that's a very important contribution when you understand text structures, that you will be able to identify main ideas much better and also underline the correct information.
So it seems to me that text structure instruction can really help a learner to engage much more effectively with the text and with the information in the text. So my question is, why don't learners understand that or engage naturally, effectively with text that carries a lot of information?
Yes, that is unfortunately one of the huge challenges. Despite all the benefits associated with text structure instruction, understanding of informational text is often a massive challenge for learners, especially for learners with language or other difficulties. One of the obvious reasons is that children are more exposed to narrative text before they start school. For example, by watching TV or movies, listening to bedtime stories, etc. Now, narrative texts usually follow a single structure with a series of events. So it's more a sequence. If children were not exposed enough to other text structures before they enter school, they might experience problems when they have to read more informational text. When they reach, I would say, about grade 4, when they do more content subjects, they have to deal with informational text to a greater extent, and the text becomes more unfamiliar because they do new subjects. It's more complex and challenging than those in narrative text. So thousands of learners struggle to understand and learn informational text, not only learners with diagnosed reading and learning difficulties. So research findings definitely mentions that many learners experience problems comprehending informational text, as they literally cannot see the basic structure of the text and they get lost in the words. Whereas learners with good understanding of informational text structure will have fewer problems with comprehension. So that is definitely something that I pick up also quite a lot, that a lot of children struggle with comprehension because they cannot comprehend the informational text.
And of course, this will become more and more problematic as learners get older because the complexity of the texts also increases as learners get older.
That's right. And they're overwhelmed with, up to the age of till grade 9, until they can choose their choice subjects. They actually don't have a choice. They've got to do numerous subjects that they actually have not been exposed to. And I think that's up to that age of grade 9 where a lot of children are really just overwhelmed with the amount of smaller subjects they must do and the amount of information that's relatively new and not part of the prior knowledge.
Estelle, regarding text structures in books and notes, what are some of the biggest challenges that learners, parents, teachers, and practitioners face?
Yes, I'm going to refer you to a small survey that I did and then link it with literature and then also get to my own personal experience. So I recently did a small-scale survey to determine the top 2 problems that parents and some educators and professionals experience with school books and classroom notes. And I organized the information and identified a few themes that I'll mention. The most important theme that came out was the organization of information in books and notes are not always logical and effective. Mm-hmm. Now that sounds difficult to believe, but it was definitely one of the most important factors that parents and some educators and professionals mention, that often one will get headings and the information under the heading is not directly linked with the heading. Or they start off talking about one thing in a paragraph and then move to something that is not related and refer to maybe 3 main categories, and then you start looking for the categories and you can never find them. So parents are really struggling to help their children often because they themselves don't know the content very well, and then the text is not always very well organized.
Right.
So another factor theme that I picked up was that textbooks and classroom notes are not always complementary. So teachers often create classroom notes and then the children must learn from the textbook and the classroom notes. But to make the connection, sometimes it's very difficult. Besides the fact that you can't find the right pages sometimes, it does not always correspond directly.
Yeah.
So information that the teachers provide then are not 100% the same as in the textbooks. The information in the books and the notes are not always complete. The academic language used in books is often challenging, and the relevance of the work is not always clear. And then there's also practical problems with print and appearance of the text that's not always effective. So what the people that I interviewed indicated how these problems affect learners is that they become totally overwhelmed and frustrated sometimes, and a lot of children struggle with learning, and in the process they waste a lot of time. When I looked at what literature was saying about this, there were definite links with the literature. So although we might assume that school books and notes are written effectively, there's ample evidence in literature that this is not the case. Joanne Williams, for example, published a lot of articles and did a lot of research on the topic of text structures, and she clearly states that textbooks are often badly organized and poorly written, and learners must get information from disorganized text. The fact that expository text is organized in a variety of structural patterns also leads to serious challenges for learners. And the structural clues within the text is sometimes easy to identify and sometimes very subtle. And when the text is not well structured, it takes a lot of cognitive effort from the side of the children to create their own organization, and then sometimes the way they do it might not be effective. Teachers and parents and practitioners are sometimes not fully aware that the problems that the learners face with are actually influenced by text structure, and that children struggle because they can't comprehend the complex informational text structures.
Right. I think what you share is highly relevant to teachers. I mean, those are very important pointers that they can pay attention to enhance the quality of the text, which will, of course, have a positive effect on the learning process also for the learner. And Estelle, as an occupational therapist, you have a lot of experience working with parents and children. So what is your opinion, based on your experience, how can we address this matter of text structure?
Just to give a little bit more of my experience, and I really have worked for a very long time with older primary school children and high school learners for more than 21 years. That has been part of my area of specialization. And I've always infused metacognitive processes, meaning I'm helping children to think and learn better in my work that I do with the children to assist them. So I'm very aware, because I work very closely with academic activities and textbooks all the time. I'm very aware of all the problems in the textbooks and the classroom notes. And when I work with parents that often sit into my sessions with children, I educate the parents and my clients about the challenges, and I always explain to them that they might struggle with learning and thinking, but part of the struggle might be related to the challenges in textbooks.
Right.
And I educate them about text structures, and I will even say to them, look, this is not a good paragraph. This is now not making sense.
Yeah.
Let's try and figure out what is going on here.
Yes.
So I try and assist them to understand that there's challenges and how to cope better with it. But often when, especially parents of younger children are very, very involved often, and they actually do summaries for the children because the children just cannot cope. And I have lots of parents that are sitting for hours and hours trying to figure out challenging informational text and trying to make summaries for their children. And when they can't do it anymore, they fall back on what I call band-aid approaches sometimes to assist their children because they can't keep up anymore.
Yeah.
So they will make use of services that print, where you can just print out summaries or worksheets. That then makes it much easier for the parents because they don't have to do it, and the children get something without actually spending time to think and to figure out the text themselves.
Yeah.
So yes, that is a huge problem for me, and that's why I'm of the opinion that we need to look at the root cause of this problem that's affecting thousands of learners. We have a lot of problems with education already in South Africa and worldwide. And it's my opinion that if we pay more attention to text structure and the problems in textbooks and classroom notes, that we can address this problem. I recently read a book by Dixon called The Future of Almost Everything, and it was very interesting in this book that he refers to the fact that busy executives still refer to print out lengthy board papers or contracts because they can read 10 times faster when they have printed information than what they can read on screen.
Sure.
He also makes a very strong case that because all of us are bombarded with streams of information, we need to identify patterns to make sense of information and to interpret and analyze and summarize the masses of information. So if we can't identify patterns, it might be directly linked with the fact that we're not picking up the text structure.
Yes.
And identifying exactly what text structure the author is trying to, or the message of the author that would be symbolized by the text structure that's being used.
Yeah.
So for me, I think definitely we need to address the problem with school textbooks and classroom notes and maybe go back to basics and infuse deliberate text structure instruction in classroom from preschool and primary school level already. And I don't think that's happening at all in South Africa. And it would help the children to be more prepared for high school and definitely for tertiary education and the world of work. I did a talk about this topic a few days ago, and actually one of the people that attended the talk was actually a trainer in the corporate sector, and she emailed me back and said, what is the situation when skills development are done? Would what I said in the talk apply to people that's at a later age in their life doing skills development programs? And I definitely think that's another area where we should pay attention, because a lot of people at a later stage in their lives get to study and then they haven't got the skills in various ways, and then they also have to face difficult informational text and they don't have the skills to deal with that. Something else that for me is very important is that although I'm very fond of the thinking maps approach to help learners to think and learn better and to deal with informational text, a lot of children don't prefer mapping at all. So often I find resistance from learners that really don't want to do any kind of mapping. Doesn't matter if it's mind maps or thinking maps, they're kind of resistant to these maps. And also because they constantly have to deal with the informational text that's not always well structured, they really struggle to identify which thinking maps to use and to see the link between the thinking maps and the textual text structures. So although it's a wonderful approach and a wonderful program, it leads to certain challenges that I think we must address on a more basic level.
Estelle, there is hope. You outlined the many challenges that we are experiencing in the school system, but also in textbooks. What are some recommended ways to teach children about text structure?
I would definitely think that one should start with some form of parent education so that parents of preschool children are also educated that they can introduce different text structures from an early age during story, reading, everyday activities, talking. If they're not aware of the text structures, they can't deliberately bring it in. So they must be made aware that there are different text structures that the children will need to deal with later on, and that they start doing that from early days. So that's the one aspect, is parent education. Then I think one needs to look at the deliberate text structure instruction, and teachers should be trained and equipped to infuse deliberate text structure instruction in class. And there's certain steps that can be followed. I'll just mention 6 very basic steps. First step would be to explain what is text structure and make the connection with the building of a house of any kind or any construction, to explain what is text structure. Then to introduce one text structure at a time, as well as the signal words and relevant mapping of the structure. Then to practice all text structures and signal words in various and fun ways without content and with subject content. And this is possible in primary school, I think. Then to increase the challenge level, meaning that the children will be confronted with more than one text structure in a paragraph or in one main idea or heading. And they will have to understand there's not always just one text structure in a section of work or even in a paragraph. Then one needs to teach children about superordinate and subordinate structures, meaning that it could be a classification, for example, a classification of types of matter, like a solid, a liquid, and a gas. But then the children learn the characteristics. So the main structure, the superordinate structure, is a classification. But the characteristics of each phase of matter is actually a description with characteristics, and that would be the subordinate structure.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, one should use common terms for text structures in all classes, not just Afrikaans and English, but in all classes and all subjects, and preferably in the whole school. Then, I think for more at-risk learners, there should be intervention programs. One can make use of visual resources like the visual resource that I'm including in the blog that links with this podcast. And the analogy that I used about the three little pigs, just to quickly expand a little bit about that, I deliberately chose that story because it can start then from a preschool and primary school level. And most children will know the story of the three little pigs that used straw or sticks or bricks to build their houses. But also, straw is not very strong and not safe. So if you also building text with weak structures, it's not going to be strong. And the wolf can be used as an analogy to explain, like the wolf blew around the straw house and the stick house. The wolf is like the challenges that learners need to cope with in terms of the challenging texts or exams or tests. And if they build their learning on the weak structures, it's not going to withstand the challenge of the tests or the exams that they need to cope with. So I use that analogy to illustrate text structure and what it's about, but then also I explained on the poster that the different parts of the story can be used to teach the different text structures like description, sequencing, cause and effect, problem and solution, etc. And then the last recommendation that I would include here for today is to then definitely say, one of the most important, that deliberate attention must be given to the writing of textbooks and creation of classroom notes by authors and educators. So the text structure instruction is infused as part of the content, so that the process of text structure instruction will be easier and more natural if it's already done more correctly and consistently in textbooks. So on the back of the visual resource that people can access in the blog section of the website, I also included 10 very basic guidelines for overall structure of classroom notes and 10 key tips to create logical content for classroom notes, maybe just to get people going. But I think more in-depth training and workshopping about this topic can be done.
Estelle, thank you so much. I've got the visual resource open here in front of me on a screen. I think it's very helpful, it's very clear, and I would really encourage our listeners to access the blog and the visual resources that we will upload on the website. And at the end of this podcast, we also provide your contact details if listeners would like to find out more about it. Estelle, what are some of the important signs that will indicate to parents, teachers, and practitioners that learners are becoming more aware of text structure to enhance their own learning?
Learners will definitely be able to identify the structure of a text and also use relevant signal words or clue words to help them with this process. Learners will definitely become aware that signal words can be misleading, and I think that is very important, and they need to reflect about the overall structure of a paragraph or main idea. That is why, although we know main keywords are important, we cannot learn keywords out of context if we can't understand the signal words to put those keywords together. Learners will be able also to form mental images and visualize the mapping that goes with the text structure. For example, a sequence or a bubble map that will indicate description, and that will help them to understand informational text easier when they read because they can visualize what it would look like. Learners will be able to discriminate between different text structures in one paragraph or main idea. They will definitely be able to identify main ideas and supporting facts easier. It doesn't matter if the main idea is a cause and an effect structure or a sequence structure, but once you identify here is something to do with cause and effect, you will be able to identify the main ideas and the facts about that specific structure easier then. Learners will definitely find learning, summarizing, and recall easier with or without mapping. They will cope better with creative writing tasks or even writing essays in subjects like life sciences or history. And I think in general, learners will be able to comprehend informational text much easier and feel less frustrated and overwhelmed, and also hopefully achieve better results. So there's definitely, I think, a lot of benefits that one will be able to recognize with text structure instruction.
Estelle, thank you so much. I think this is very helpful to parents and teachers and practitioners. On the block, you have also listed a number of recommended and applicable literature sources. So I'll really encourage our listeners to access the block and look at those recommended literature sources that you have listed. Where can our listeners get hold of you if they want to have more information?
Okay, let me give my email address. It's Estelle, Estelle, at Brettenny, BRETTENY.co.za, or they can go to my website, that is www.brettenny.co.za, or phone me 082-430-7956.
And of course, for our international listeners, if you want to phone, the code to come into South Africa is +27, and then with a number, omit the 0, and then it's 82-430-7956. Estelle, thank you so much. Thank you for your wonderful contribution to this podcast and to our listeners, the lives of our listeners, but also to the many lives out there that you are continuously impacting in a positive way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on this podcast. Thanks, Fabian.
This podcast is produced by the Institute for the Advancement of Cognitive Education. Find us online at www.ilearnthinking.org or on social media at iLearnThinking.